I never thought I'd end up here, honestly. My name's Mike, and I was married to Lisa for about 7 years before I found out she was cheating on me. We seemed like a solid couple at first, normal, maybe even a little boring, but I thought that was what stability looked like. She's always been the kind of woman who acts like she's too good for everything, a real bitchy type, always throwing around her attitude like she's queen of the world. And yeah, she did love to lie. Said she was busy with work, that she was too tired, or that it was just a stupid coworker trying to get her to cheat. I bought into her bullshit for a long time, mostly because I didn't want to believe she'd do something so reckless. It started to feel off about 6 months ago. Small things at first. She was more distant, secretive with her phone, always locking it when I was around, hiding texts. She started working late more often, claiming it was important meetings or a new project. But it wasn't just that. She'd come home looking guilty sometimes, eyes darting around, and I'd catch her in little lies. When I'd ask what she was doing, she'd brush it off, call me paranoid or insecure. But I wasn't stupid. I knew something was wrong, and I could feel it gnawing at me. Then came the weirdest part, her phone logs. I've always been pretty into tech, so I did some digging after I noticed her hiding her messages. That's when I stumbled across something I couldn't explain. These bizarre access logs from her neural firewall technician, a guy named Mark. He's some kind of security expert who protected her brain implants from hacking. Yeah, I know, sounds sci-fi, but this is the world we live in now. Anyway, the logs showed authorized access to her emotional centers during times when she said she was sleeping or working out. Not just once or twice, but repeatedly at times I knew she was with me or at home. It was like someone had been inside her head, messing with her feelings, her memories. I couldn't believe it. It was right there on my screen, a list of accesses during her working late nights. When I confronted her about the logs, she looked at me like I was crazy, said I was reading too much into it, that maybe I'd misunderstood the data or that it was some kind of technical glitch. But I knew her well enough to see she was lying. Her face was guilty, her tone defensive, and her eyes kept darting around like she was trying to hide something. That's when I started to put the pieces together. She wasn't just cheating physically, she was being emotionally manipulated, controlled, even, by someone who had inside access to her brain. It was terrifying, honestly. I felt like I'd been betrayed not just by her, but by the whole world of technology I thought I understood. I remember that night vividly. I sat there staring at the screen, trying to process what I'd discovered, feeling like my entire life was crumbling. I'd always thought Lisa was just a bitchy, manipulative woman, but now I saw she was also vulnerable, maybe even a victim of something much darker. I didn't sleep that night. I kept going over the logs, trying to figure out how deep this rabbit hole went. The thought that someone, Mark or whoever was behind this, had been inside her head, it made me feel sick. How long had this been going on? Was she even aware of it? Or was she completely under someone else's control? The betrayal felt different this time, more profound, more personal. I started to realize that her cheating wasn't just physical. This was something else, something I couldn't explain fully yet, but I knew it was bad. And from that moment, I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just sit back and let this continue. I had to find out who Mark was, what he'd done, and how to undo it. But I also knew I'd have to confront Lisa about it all, face her lies head on. This wasn't just about infidelity anymore. It was about control, about trust on a whole new level. And honestly, I didn't know whether I was ready for any of it. But I sure as hell knew I couldn't just ignore what I'd found. The stakes were way too high now. The more I dug into the logs, the more convinced I became that this Mark guy wasn't just some random hacker or tech whiz. He was someone with real access, real power over her emotional core. And that thought made everything worse. It wasn't just about her cheating, it was about her being manipulated, possibly brainwashed. I started to obsess over it, replaying everything I'd seen, trying to piece it all together. I knew I needed answers, but I also knew confronting her directly was going to be messy. One night after a long day at work, I found her in the kitchen pretending to be normal, her usual bitchy attitude on full display. "Hey, Mike," she sneered, flipping her hair. "What's up? You look like you've seen a ghost." I was furious but kept my voice steady. Lisa, I saw the logs, those access times, you know what I'm talking about. Her eyes flickered and she tried to brush it off, but I caught her. Don't play that game, I know someone been inside your head. Mark, the firewall technician, what's going on? She rolled her eyes and scoffed. You're overreacting as usual. That stuff is all technical mumbo-jumbo. Honestly, you're so insecure, you're always suspecting me of cheating. Maybe you're the one who's insecure, huh? That was typical Lisa, deflect, lie, deny. But this time I wasn't buying it. I told her I knew she'd been lying, that I'd seen the logs and that I was done playing her game. She snapped back at me saying, God, you're so paranoid. Maybe I need to find someone who can actually satisfy me instead of you griping about this nerd stuff. That hit me hard. Her tone was bitter and she sounded so dismissive, like I was nothing to her. I pushed her further, asking what she was hiding, why she was really spending so much time with Mark. Her reaction was quick. She started crying, acting like I was attacking her. You don't understand, she wailed. Mark, just helping me with some brain tech stuff. He's a professional, okay? It's not what you think. You're just jealous because I have a life outside of your boring ass. I almost lost it at that point. The way she lied so effortlessly, like she'd memorized her script, made me realize how sick this whole thing was. She was lying high and mighty about someone who was inside her head. That's when I started to see the full picture. She was not just cheating on me. She was being manipulated, controlled by someone who had access to her deepest emotions, her memories, her vulnerability. The next days were a blur. I started monitoring her, watching for any signs, any new clues. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something even bigger, and I was right. One evening I caught her sneaking out after I went to bed. I followed her to a nondescript apartment complex downtown. I parked around the corner, heart pounding, and saw her go inside with Mark. They weren't just talking. They looked like they were doing something intense, almost like secret agents in a covert operation. I could see her silhouette through the window and her face was lit by a screen or some device. I felt sick. It was worse than I thought. This wasn't just about her cheating, it was about her being used as a pawn. Whoever Mark was, he had the power to do things I couldn't even understand. If he could manipulate her emotions, change her feelings, then what was next? Could he make her turn against me completely? The thought chilled me to the bone. That night I stood outside, trying to process everything, knowing I'd have to do something drastic if I wanted to save what was left of us. But what? How? Do you fight someone who controls your wife's mind? How do you even start fixing what's been broken? All I knew was that I couldn't just watch this happen anymore. I had to act. I had to find a way to get her back, to undo whatever Mark had done, before it was too late. The next few days were a nightmare. I started researching everything I could about neural firewalls, emotional hacking, and mind control tech. Honestly, it's a rabbit hole I never expected to fall into. I found a few forums and some obscure tech black markets where people were talking about this kind of stuff like it was normal. There were tools, software, hardware, even specialists who could manipulate or even erase such access. I realized I needed help, real help, but it wasn't like calling the police or even your regular tech support. This was deep, dark stuff, and I had no idea where to even start. Meanwhile, Lisa kept acting like everything was fine, except I could see through her. She was tense, defensive, and trying to pretend like nothing had changed. But I knew better. Every time she got a message or a call, her eyes would flicker. With guilt or fear. She was hiding something, and I was sure Mark was behind it all. I felt like I was losing my mind, but I couldn't give up. I couldn't let her fall completely under his control. One night I decided I had to confront her again, get her to admit something. I waited until she was half asleep, then gently woke her up. Lisa, I said softly, I know what's going on. I know Mark been inside your head. I saw those logs. You're not just cheating on me, he's messing with your brain. Her eyes flew open and she looked embarrassed, then furious. Are you insane? She spat. You think I'd let some tech nerd control my emotions? You're just paranoid. All that stuff you're saying, it's just your insecurity talking. I love you, but I don't need a damn babysitter. She sat up, glaring at me like I was the crazy one, but I pressed on, telling her I had proof. I laid out everything I knew, from the access logs to seeing her sneaking out. Her face twisted into a sneer. "Fine," she snapped. "You want proof? Here's your proof." She pulled out her phone and handed it to me. It was a message from Mark, a picture of her with him, smiling like they were best buddies. "We've been working together a lot. It's nothing, just a professional relationship. But if you're so obsessed with control, maybe you're the one who needs help." Her voice was dripping with contempt, trying to turn the tables. I felt my blood boil. I realized then that she was lying, oh yeah. She was hiding the truth from me, but the truth was right there in front of me. Mark's influence was deeper than I thought. She wasn't just cheating, she was being manipulated, used as a pawn in some sick game. And I was damn sure I wasn't going to let it go on like this. I needed a plan, a serious one, to get her free from whatever hold this Mark guy had on her. I couldn't just storm in and demand answers, though. This was bigger than a simple fight. I needed someone who understood brain tech, hacking, and mind control. Someone who could help me break through her defenses without blowing everything up. I started reaching out to contacts I knew vaguely from the tech world, trying to find someone who could help me get inside her head in a clean, controlled way. I knew it sounded crazy, but I didn't see any other options. If Mark could access her emotional centers, I had to believe there was a way to shut him out, to reboot her mind like a corrupted system. While I was doing all this, Lisa kept pushing back, trying to gaslight me, insisting she was fine. She'd say anything to keep me from unraveling her carefully constructed lies, but I could see the cracks. Her words didn't match her eyes. She was scared, vulnerable, and maybe even regretful, but she wasn't ready to admit the full truth. Not yet. One thing I did know is that I wasn't going to sit around waiting for her to come to her senses. I had to act fast. I couldn't lose her to whoever Mark was or to whatever control he wielded. I was beginning to understand that her betrayal wasn't just about sex or lies. It was about her mind, her very consciousness. If I didn't do something, I might lose her forever. And that thought terrified me, more than anything else I'd ever faced. I spent the next night staying up, poring over every scrap of information I could find. I reached out to some contacts I'd made in the underground tech circles, people who knew about neural hacking, brain security, and mind manipulation. Surprisingly, I found someone willing to talk, but it wasn't cheap or easy. The guy, named Derek, told me straight up that Mark's kind of access wasn't normal. It was advanced, experimental, and dangerous. He explained that Mark could bypass even the most secure firewalls, access emotional centers directly, and even implant false memories or feelings. It was like having someone inside your head, controlling your thoughts, something I'd never even imagined possible. Derek warned me that trying to reverse this kind of damage was risky. Sometimes the process could backfire, leaving people even more messed up than before. Still, I was desperate. I told him I wanted to do whatever it took to free Lisa from Mark's grip. We agreed to meet in a safe location the next day, and he promised to help me develop a plan. I felt a tiny flicker of hope. Maybe there was a way to fix this, to get her back. In the meantime, I kept a closer eye on her. She was increasingly distant, avoiding my questions, her phone always within reach. I knew she was hiding something, but I also knew she might not even be fully aware of it anymore. Mark's influence could be so insidious that she was losing herself, becoming a puppet. That realization made my blood run cold. She wasn't just cheating or lying. She was possibly functioning under someone else's command, completely unaware of it. The thought of losing her to some hacker or tech freak made me furious, but also deeply sad. I loved her and I didn't want to lose her like this. The night I met Derek, everything changed. We sat in his cluttered apartment, surrounded by monitors, wires, and flash drives. He explained a strategy. First, we'd need to get her to a safe environment where Mark's influence was weakened, then use specialized software to try and sever his access. It was risky. Mark's access wasn't just software-based. It had embedded itself into her neural pathways. If we failed, her mind could be permanently damaged, or worse, she might never come back. Still, it was our only shot. Derek warned me that the process might be painful, that she might resist, or even remember things she'd rather forget. I didn't care. I was ready to do whatever it took. We planned to do the extraction at a location I'd set up, somewhere private away from anyone who might interfere. I knew this was a gamble, but I couldn't afford to wait any longer. Mark had been inside her head for too long, and I was afraid that if I hesitated, she'd never be the same again, or worse, she'd get completely erased. The day of the operation, I felt like I was walking to my own execution. I kept thinking about all the times we'd had, her bitchy attitude, her lies, her sneers, and how much I'd loved her despite all that. I kept telling myself I'd do everything to save her, no matter what. When we finally started, I saw her lying on the bed, eyes closed, looking so fragile. Derek worked quickly, connecting wires, running the program, and talking me through the process. I held her hand, trembling, trying to stay calm, but feeling like I was on the edge of a breakdown. Suddenly, her eyes fluttered open. For a moment, I thought it was over, she was awake, and maybe she was coming back. But then she looked at me with a cold, unfamiliar stare. It was like looking at a stranger. Her voice was distant, almost robotic. "You shouldn't have come here," she said, her tone flat. Then she tried to sit up, fighting against the wires. I could see the resistance in her face, the confusion and fear battling Mark's control. That's when I realized the fight wasn't over. Mark's influence had taken hold so deeply that even the tech couldn't fully erase him. She was fighting to regain her mind, but she was also struggling against what felt like her own consciousness being ripped apart. I saw tears in her eyes, maybe tears of confusion, maybe of anger, before she finally collapsed again, exhausted. I knew then that we'd pushed her to the brink, but I also knew it was the only way to start undoing Mark's damage. I left that night knowing I'd have to keep fighting. This wasn't over yet. I had to find a way to get her fully free, to restore her mind and her trust. I couldn't let Mark win. I loved her too much. But I also realized that this was a war, one I might not win easily, and that I was about to walk into a very dark place. After that night, everything felt different. Lisa was still in a strange state, partially responsive, sometimes distant, sometimes crying out in frustration. It was like she was caught between two worlds, one where she was herself and another where Mark's influence was still trying to control her. Derek told me it was a normal part of the process, that she needed time and support, but even he sounded cautious. He warned me that Mark's access could have left residual effects, maybe even some subconscious triggers still active. I spent the next few days trying to stay close to her, but it was clear she was fragile. Whenever she was awake, I tried to talk to her about everything. What happened, our life together, anything to anchor her to reality. But she'd often look right through me, lost in some fog. I'd catch her whispering to herself, sometimes crying softly, sometimes cursing Mark under her breath. It was heartbreaking. I'd never seen her like this, so vulnerable, so broken. I wondered if she even recognized me anymore, or if she was just some puppet hanging on by a thread. Meanwhile, I kept working with Derek, trying to refine our plan. He explained that Mark's access was deeply embedded in her neural pathways, almost like a virus that had integrated itself into her brain. The only way to really fix it was a series of targeted neural resets, delicate, invasive, and risky. We'd have to do it in stages, carefully, to give her a chance to rebuild her own mind without Mark's influence. The bigger risk was that if we pushed too hard, she might lose all her memories, everything that made her who she was. It was a gamble I was willing to take if it meant bringing her back. One evening, she looked at me with a flicker of recognition, her eyes clearer than they'd been in days. "Mike," she whispered hoarsely, reaching out to hold my hand. "I don't remember everything, but I know you. I know I love you, I think." Hearing her say that, even with the fog still clouding her mind, made my shoulders relax for the first time in days. It also made me realize how fragile this whole thing was. Her love, her memories, they weren't gone yet, but Mark's influence was still lurking, hiding just beneath the surface. That night I decided I couldn't wait any longer. If I was going to save her, I had to act fast. I arranged for a more advanced neural reset, this time in a more controlled environment with Derek overseeing the whole process. I knew the stakes, but I also knew I couldn't keep living in limbo. This was our only shot. I stayed by her side, holding her hand as the procedure began, watching her face twist with pain and confusion. Her breathing grew ragged and her body tensed as the system worked to purge Mark's influence. And then silence. For a moment I thought it was over. But then her eyes fluttered open and she looked around, disoriented. She blinked, then slowly focused on me. Her voice was shaky but resolute. "Mike, I remember everything. You're right. He's gone. Mark's gone." Her words hit me like a freight train. I felt tears welling up, relief flooding through me. It wasn't over yet, but I could see the light returning to her eyes. She was fighting to come back piece by piece. But just as I started to believe in a happy ending, things shifted again. She suddenly jerked her head to the side, a look of panic crossing her face. "No," she whispered, trembling. "He's still here, inside me. I can feel him." I froze, heart pounding. That was impossible, right? Or maybe it was. Maybe Mark's influence had left a residual imprint, some subconscious part still holding on. I knew I couldn't trust that moment entirely, but I also knew I had to keep fighting. The next days were a roller coaster. Lisa's recovery was uneven. Sometimes she'd be herself, caring, sharp, loving. Other times she'd drift back into that fog, her eyes dark and distant. I realized that the fight wasn't just about hacking or rewiring her brain. It was about reclaiming her soul. For the first time in a long time, I felt hope, but also terror. Mark's damage was deep, and I wasn't sure if I'd ever fully free her. Still, I was committed. Whatever it took, I was going to bring her back true, whole, and unmanipulated. Because I loved her, and I refused to lose her to some sick tech game. The final stretch was the hardest. I knew I was close, closer than I'd ever been. But I also knew that Mark's influence might still be lurking, waiting to claw its way back into her mind. I couldn't afford to be careless. Every day I watched Lisa, hoping she'd stay stable, that her mind wouldn't slip away again. Derek worked tirelessly in the background, fine-tuning the neural resets, trying to fully purge the last remnants of Mark's control. It felt like I was trying to rebuild a shattered mirror, piece by fragile piece, hoping I didn't break it further. One evening, Lisa looked at me with a clarity I hadn't seen in weeks. Her voice was steady, her eyes focused. "Mike," she said softly, "I remember everything now. The logs, the hacking, Mark. I remember what he did to me." She paused, then added, "It's over, I'm back. And I want to be with you, free from that bastard." Hearing her say that was like finally catching my breath after drowning. I held her hands tightly, feeling tears sting my eyes. But I knew better than to celebrate prematurely. The battle wasn't finished until I knew for sure she was truly free. No shadows, no residual programming. Derek and I performed one last, intensive neural reprogramming, a final sweep to erase every last trace of Mark's influence. It was brutal, and there were moments I thought it might rip her apart, but I kept telling her to hold on, that I was with her. When it was done, she looked at me, her face soft, her expression calm. She smiled, genuine, whole. "I love you," she whispered, and I believed her. For the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. But the aftermath wasn't easy. Lisa had to relearn who she was. Memories, feelings, everything that made her her had to be rebuilt from scratch. She was scarred, haunted by what Mark had done, but she was alive. We spent weeks talking, rebuilding trust piece by piece. She admitted she'd been lost, manipulated, and that even now she was afraid of what her mind might still hide. I promised her that I'd be there for every step. Looking back, I realized that this whole nightmare taught me a lot about trust, technology's dark side, and the importance of fighting for the people we love, no matter how hopeless it seems. Mark's access, his manipulation of her emotions, it was a nightmare made real, but I learned that even in the darkest moments, love can be a weapon, powerful enough to fight back against even the most insidious forms of control. Now, Lisa and I are rebuilding our life slowly, cautiously. She's still healing, and I know there will be scars, both physical and emotional. But I also know that sometimes, love isn't just about the good times. It's about fighting through the darkness, confronting the monsters hiding in the shadows, and never giving up hope. Because if there's one thing I've learned from all this, it's that even when everything seems lost, there's always a way back, if you're willing to fight for it.